Go.
Go.
Greetings, cardboard architects, and welcome to episode 21 of Command Tower. This episode is sponsored in part by Our House Games. Let's check out the decks.
Hi, my name is Collin. I'm coming back with Yenna, Redtooth Regent. This is a Enchantress copy deck where I try to use Yenna and different copy effects such as Undo Spirit Dancer to create copies of my enchantments, to accrue value from Sithis, stuff like Sigil of the Empty Throne for additional tokens, or Shield of the Oversoul for protecting my stuff and potentially getting combat damage.
This is Chris, and today I'm going to be play that funky music, White Boy, captained by Soundwave Sonic Spy. It's just Esper robots with artifact synergy.
Hi, this is Nick, and I'm playing Aragorn the Unifier. It's human tribal, and it sets to put out humans on the battlefield, protect them, and smash in.
My name is Esteban, and today I'm playing Runo Stormkirk, which is transformed into Crothis, and the theme of this deck is just sea creature tribal. Put out big sea creatures by ramping up with artifacts, and then making them swing big and making copies of them when I do so, and then a little bit of pillow forting or making them unblockable.
Collin began with 3 Dreams, Aura of Silence, Timely Ward, Sterling Grove, 2 Plains, and a Warped Landscape. Chris began with Kappa Cannoneer, Flawless Maneuver, Sword of Light and Shadow, Urza's Saga, a Plains, a Sea of Clouds, and a Razortide Bridge. Nick began with Druid of Purification, Dr. John Seward, Windswept Heath, Hallowed Fountain, Boseiju Who Endures, Scalding Tarn, and a Plains. Esteban kicked off with an archetype of imagination, Marauding Brinefang, Dark Ritual, Scroll Rack, Myriad Landscape, a Morphic Pool, and a Rivendell. Nick will kick us off with a Scalding Tarn, which he will crack to go and search for Jetmir's Garden. Esteban will follow with Myriad Landscape. Collin will play a Plains and pass. Chris will play Razortide Bridge, entering the battlefield tapped. Nick will play a tapped Hallowed Fountain and pass to Esteban. Esteban will tap 2 for a Scroll Rack. Collin will pay 2 to cast Core Spirit Dancer. Whenever he casts an Aura spell, he can draw a card. Chris will cast a Scroll Rack of his own. Nick will pay 3 and cast Dr. John Seward. So whenever he casts a creature spell, he can create a 1/1 green and white human soldier creature token with training. Esteban will crack his Myriad Landscape to search for 2 swamps. He will then pass to Collin, who will play a Plains, and pay 2 to crack his Warped Landscape, searching for a forest. Chris will play Sea of Clouds, and tap 3 to activate Urza's Saga, making a construct. And he will pass to Nick, who will play his 4th land, and cast his commander, Aragorn the Uniter. Dr. John Seward will create a 1/1 human creature token when Aragorn comes in, and Nick will pass the turn to Esteban. Esteban will Island Cycle Marauding Brinefang. He will go and search for a Watery Grave, shock it in, and cast his commander Runo Stormkirk, putting Marauding Brinefang on top of his deck. Collin will pay 2 for Sithis Harvest Hand, so whenever he casts an enchantment spell, he can gain a life and draw a card. Additionally, he will cast Sterling Grove, giving his enchantments Shroud, and he can sacrifice the Sterling Grove to go tutor for any enchantment and put it on top of his deck. At the end of Chris's draw step, he will crack Urza's Saga and go search for a Soul Ring. He will then tap 5 to cast his commander for the More Than Meets the Eye cost, creating Soundwave, Superior Captain. Nick will enter his 5th turn and play a land. He will then tap 3 and cast Boromir, Warden of the Tower, giving his team a protective shield against any board wipes. He will also earn a 1/1 human creature token off of Aragorn. Aragorn will then attack Chris, and Dr. John Seward will attack Collin, and the 1/1 human creature token will attack Esteban. Nick gets his training counters, And his Seward and the 1/1 will be a bit bigger. Esteban will go to his turn, revealing the top card of his deck and transforming his commander into Crothus. He will then cast a Dark Ritual. And use the mana to cast Rexiel, the Risen Deep. He will then Island Cycle Marauding Brinefang again. Collin will go into his turn and cast Yenna, Redtooth Regent, the first time his commanders actually made it into a video. Chris will play a land. He will tap Soundwave for the improvised cost, and he will cast a Kappa Cannoneer. Kappa Cannoneer will trigger himself on entry and become a 5/5. This will convert Soundwave back into his original form and earn Chris Laserbeak, a 2/2 flying hexproof creature. Chris will pass the turn to Nick, who will untap, draw, and Nick will play a Windswept Heath, weigh his options, and cast Eowyn Shield Maiden. So off of Aragorn, he will scry 2, deal 3 damage to someone, and earn a 1/1 white human creature token. Nick will then go to combat when he earns 2 human knights, and he will draw a card because he controls 6 or more humans. Nick considers an attack. And simply decides to pass the turn to Esteban. Esteban will cast a Kindred Dominance. This will destroy all creatures other than the chosen type, which I believe is Serpents, or something that keeps his 2 creatures alive, and he's attempting to blow up the rest of the board of creatures. However, Nick will sacrifice Boromir in order to protect his team, and Chris will play Flawless Maneuver to give all his creatures indestructible. Collin will crack his Sterling Grove in order to search for a Smothering Tithe and put it on top of his deck. Collin will cast Citizen Champion, so the champion will get bigger, having synergy with other enchantments, and he'll draw a card whenever he does play an enchantment. Chris will cast Sword of Light and Shadow, giving him the ability to recur creatures and gain some life. Chris will attack Esteban with Kappa Cannoneer for 7. Nick will crack his fetch land and go search for a Sacred Grove. Nick will then pay 5 and attempt an Overwhelming Stampede. He will give Aragorn +4/+4 from the trigger. However, Esteban will cast Force of Will to stop the Overwhelming Stampede. He will be exiling Archetype of Imagination to cast Force of Will. Esteban will attack, Nick will attack Esteban with his pumped up Aragorn, and Esteban will choose to block with Rexiel the Risen Deep. Esteban will use Rivendell to scry the top cards of his deck, and then he will cast Quicksilver Amulet. Collin will cast Smothering Tithe, and he will play his 5th land, and Citizen Champion will get a counter and draw Collin a card. Chris will move on to his turn. He'll tap 6 and cast Noxious Gearhulk. When the Gearhulk enters the battlefield, he will target Aragorn, attempting to destroy it. However, Nick will play a Heroic Intervention, giving his creatures hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Chris will move to attacks. He'll send the Kappa Cannoneer at Nick and the Laserbeak at Collin. Nick will move into his turn. Considering what the best thing to do is. And he'll go ahead and cast Druid of Purification. So neither Esteban, nor Collin, nor Chris will choose an artifact to destroy, but Nick will choose to destroy Chris's Kappa Cannoneer. This will trigger Aragorn, who will get +4/+4, and he will earn himself, well, that's all he'll earn. Sorry, a lot of triggers going on here. He will earn a 1/1 soldier off of Dr. John Seward for playing another creature. He will move to combat, and Eowyn will create 2 human knights and also draw Nick a card, since he does have 6 or more humans. Nick will then cast Jetmir, Nexus of Revels, dealing 3 damage to an opponent, giving Aragorn +4/+4, and earning a 1/1 soldier token. Nick will then move into combat. He'll send the left or the right group of creatures at Esteban, and the right group of creatures are going at Collin, and the left group of creatures are going at Chris. Jetmir is pumping everything up by +3/+0, and they all have double strike, so we're looking at a ton of damage here. This is enough to take Collin out of the game. Chris will take a heap from Aragorn. And with the other creatures, he will drop all the way down to 4 life. And Nick will untap his creatures. He was just tapping them to designate who is attacked, but all the creatures do have vigilance from Jetmir. Esteban will scry once again with his Rivendell. He carefully decides to activate Scroll Rack. And he finds a Whelming Wave, so he'll cast a Whelming Wave, returning all creatures to their hand except for Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, and Serpents. This will keep Crothis on the board and overwhelm both Nick and Chris to bounce all of their creatures back to their hand. And Esteban will choose to attack Nick for 3 with Crothis. Chris will kick off his turn by casting his commander, converted as Soundwave Superior Captain. And he'll pass the turn to Nick. Nick will recast Aragorn the Uniter. And he'll cast Dr. John Seward. This will earn him a 1/1 token off of Aragorn, since Dr. John is a white creature. Esteban will cast Junkwinder. Rather, put it into play with Quicksilver Amulet. And he will pass the turn to Chris. Chris will play Noxious Gearhulk once again. And he will target Aragorn, who will die this time. He'll gain life to Aragorn's toughness, which is 5. And convert his commander back into Soundwave, the original form. And he will earn a Laserbeak token off of that. Chris will go to combat, and he will attack Nick with Soundwave. The Sword of Feast and Famine will trigger, so he will return a Kappa Cannoneer back to his hand and gain 3 life. Nick will pay 4 and cast the Druid of Purification once again. As before, Nick's opponents will not choose to destroy anything, however Nick will choose to destroy Chris's commander with Druid of Purification. This will earn Nick a 1/1 white human off of Dr. John. He will then go to combat after casting Eowyn, and he will earn 2 human knights. And he will also draw a card since he controls 6 or more humans. Esteban will move into combat. He will be attacking with Crothis, so this is a very scary situation for his opponents, because Crothis is going to be triggering for the first time this game. And we see that each copy of Junkwinder will be triggering twice for a total of 6 triggers, and he will tap 6 of Nick's creatures down. He then has a lot of damage from the Serpents coming at him, and that will drop him all the way to 0, and Nick will be eliminated from the game. Chris will move into his turn. He'll tap his Soul Ring, and once again bring out the Kappa Cannoneer. It'll get a +1/+1 counter when it enters. And Chris moves into combat. He will attack Esteban with Noxious Gearhulk and Laserbeak. Esteban will drop to 21. Esteban will attack Chris with his team. He will tap down Kappa Cannoneer. However, Chris will cast Darkness and prevent all combat damage this turn. At the end of the turn, Chris will cast Vraska's Contempt, exiling the original Junkwinder, and Chris will gain 2 life. He will then activate Scroll Rack, putting 2 cards on top of his deck and drawing 2 cards. And back to Esteban. Esteban will attack Chris with a bunch of Junkwinder tokens. However, Chris will just say, "Peace," with Teferi's Protection. Chris will draw a card, wondering what he might be able to find to get him out of the bind he's currently in. Staring down a large army of Serpents. And Chris will cast Karn Legacy Reforged, getting him some extra mana. This will trigger Kappa Cannoneer, who will get a +1/+1 counter. Chris will go to combat and attack Esteban with Kappa Cannoneer, Noxious Gearhulk, and Laserbeak. Esteban will Reality Shift. And he'll target the Kappa Cannoneer with the Reality Shift. So he will take 7. And then Chris will Path to Exile one of the Junkwinder tokens, Reality Shift another one of them. And Esteban will simply go to his turn, attack with the Junkwinders, and take Chris out of the game. Esteban wins. Thank you to our sponsor, Our House Games. Stop by and tell them the episode code for a chance to score a pre-pack of Commander Masters. This episode's code is ORIGIN. That's ORIGIN. Also, if you hit the like button and leave a comment, you'll be entered to win free Commander product, courtesy of Our House Games. Thanks for watching.